Hello, everybody, and welcome back to that Milan podcast. Martino Puccio, Matt Santangelo alongside me, as always. We're going to get a quick episode in here today, highlighting everything for the Como match, Milan's potential to climb back into the top four chase. Again, in the international break, a lot of stuff is going to die out for a little bit, but I'm sure there's going to be some BS stories coming afoot for sure with the club. But once again, we just want to thank you guys for all the support. Again, follow us everywhere at That Milan Podcast. Like and subscribe to the channel here. Subscribe to our other channel at That Milan Pod. Go and check out Kush's latest video featuring our guy Matthew over here, who stepped in while Kush is still away. Kush has been putting out great content there, allowing other creators to kind of have a voice on his platform. It's just a stand-up guy. Again, I always seem to work whenever Milan are playing matches, and this week was no different. So let's hop right into it, Matt. Once again, you had the final score correct in this one. I was robbed of 3 goals. Should have been 4, honestly, with Milan. But once again, Milan fall behind in a match in which they should have gone up initially. And then they end up conceding Paz over to D'Acunha for 1-0 lead for Como. So, yeah, I mean, let's just kind of get into, I guess, the first half. Your initial thoughts. It just, again, just super frustrating. You see everything with Musa rounds the goalkeeper. I have a couple things to say about that one, but I'll let you go first. What were your initial, I don't know, first 30 minutes or so? Your takeaway from that? I mean, Como ends up scoring at the 33rd minute, but just overall with Milan, it's like, okay, we're not awful, but we're down again somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was obviously frustrating to see Musa miss a clear chance. And as I mentioned in the review episode for Kush on his channel, which again, Martino, as he mentioned, go check that out. Appreciate the feedback as well. It was disappointing in the sense that, I think that Milan, the way they've been playing these past months, and the way that the situation has been so dire, they needed to start quick. They needed to be a quick starting team this time. And they didn't need to go down again, which has kind of been a theme for them, right? They need to get kicked in the teeth to react and to overturn
It's ridiculous.
a lot of these matches, right? Which is obviously not ideal. It's not something you want to see at this phase of the season, March 18th at the time of recording. You want to be rounding into form. You want to be a team that, can go up in the first 10, 15 minutes of a match and set the tone. And, obviously at home as well, you want to be able to you sort of create this difficult environment for Como to play, which again, all credit to them. They came into this match in pretty good form as far as where they are positioned in the table. They have some players that can really do damage. We've highlighted them in the preview episode last week. So they weren't going to play timid. They were going to play with their possession that you tend to focus on, and they were going to take their chances forward. Nico Paz was a real threat. He had an assist in this game. No surprise there. A great finish as well from D'Acunha. But again, back to that Musa miss, very disappointing because I think that, I can't remember the last time not only Milan scored first and were, the ones to get first blood, but also score so early to kind of calm the nerves a bit and to give the fans some sort of ease, because the way the first half played out, as you mentioned, Milan went down. The Milan players were booed off at halftime, which rightfully so, because aside from a couple moments early on in the first half, 2 of them through Musa, one was the miss, and then the second one was he was right at the edge of the box, couldn't corral and handle the ball, and that was another great opportunity. Como really were the better team for large chunks of this match. Of course, the second half turned in our favor, but the first half was not what we wanted to see from Milan. And again, the same theme, same pattern, having to get kicked in the teeth, go down, and having to kind of scratch, claw, and make it a scrappy game and make it more difficult than it needed to be.
I think the one thing on the Musa miss as well is I was very frustrated with seeing Reijnders and Santi not just even be aggressive enough to poach that. It was a poor shot by Musa, but if you saw it, TG and Santi were both unmarked in that area. If they just simply act aggressive and poach that, Milan go up right there. And then again, just, obviously with your point, Musa has a very poor touch, makes it really difficult for Milan to actually even capitalize in any manner on that. And, I got a lot of flack for being quote unquote attacking
Critical.
Yunus Musa.
Yeah.
I mean, just to not even like address this, because I don't think this person deserves any more limelight for being a moron. But we criticize anybody um, on this
No
podcast.
matter their race, no matter their background, where they're from,
I
if they're
mean,
Italian, if
how
they're
many
from
podcasts
France.
over the years and the people who
Yeah.
have stuck with us through the years, how many times every time we hear Mike Magnan getting racist chants against him against Udinese just last season. We were there at the forefront to criticize that and why the league did nothing to help Milan with that situation. Everything that Bakayoko went through, the stuff that Balotelli had to go through in the past, and multiple other players of color that had gone through so much and that we support and back all the time. To get comments like that is really concerning, and I think it's scummy. And I think if you're still listening to this podcast and you know exactly who you are, you should be ashamed of yourself, because we're not here to attack Yunus Musa. Nobody, what do we benefit from that? We don't want to see anyone struggle, especially someone who plays for US men's national team. Like, it's just stupid to insinuate an agenda, and also to say that we wouldn't call out Santi Jimenez for anything. Like, Santi had done poorly as well. Like, I got flack for this player, that player. Fact is, like, listen, Matt and I are very objective, and doesn't matter who you are as a player, we will call you out. I have called out Teo Hernandez more than any player this season. Okay, so whatever. Maybe if you want to think for a second, and also to say I didn't give credit to Tammy Abraham, who we'll talk about here in a second. I had a somewhat viral tweet on Calcio Twitter about Tammy Abraham. Okay, so Tammy was great. Tammy was providing great service. So we'll get that into the second half. But just to say, people who think that we have an agenda against certain players, you're idiots. Let's put it that way. So again, Milan go down 1-0 with that. They get booed off at the half. Then kind of the two of the three players that have consistently bailed out Milan this season once again do it. It's either Leao, Reijnders, or Pulisic in this one. And again, Pulisic was just a tremendous finish here. I thought the pass here by Reijnders was great. This was also a really good link-up play in general with Teo. And I think it was Alex Jimenez as well that really did a great job of linking up here in tight space. Reijnders gets that ball through to Pulisic, and honestly, like, it's very funny to say, but Pulisic's weak foot is his left foot. But at this rate, he is one of the better two-footed players that we have in Serie A, and you consistently see it with his left foot finishes. This one was no different. This one was to tie the match here in the 53rd minute. Milan got off to a good start within the second half, and they sort of really didn't look back at this point. You just felt like all the momentum and pressure was shifting in this match, and Milan did a really great job not only of tying this one up, but, Reijnders and Pulisic, once again, just the technical ability, the finishing by the both of them. We'll get into Reijnders' goal in a second, but I just thought the link-up play here, it just looks so good and refreshing to see Milan have that sort of offensive combination, as opposed to just this, great ball by Leao, and then Pulisic is finishing at the far post, where it's just really individualistic scoring there. I think this one was more of like a team goal, which is, to me, that makes me feel a lot more at ease just to see that finally. I'm not saying it's been consistent, because it hasn't, but I really like the way this one looked within this, and just all around, this was one of the better team goals that they've had in the Conceição era, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you kind of covered everything there. I thought that Pulisic, just outside of the goal even, I thought was pretty strong. That was something that we praised in the preview episode, where, there was a lot of things that maybe, were showing in some of his more recent performances, right? He went through a little bit of a goal drought as well, I think, prior to a couple weeks ago. I know he's been dealing with injuries, and it was seen as though that Milan's form was also kind of aligning with Pulisic and where maybe he was with his injuries, not being maybe as crucial and clinical in the final third as we've been accustomed to seeing since he arrived here. So a really refreshing two performances from him. because he was obviously very good against Lecce. He got the 2 goals in a match like this. Really great finish with the left foot. Tight angle, not easy, beats the keeper far post. And I just want to kind of touch on Reijnders real quick as well,
Go
because
for
I
it.
thought there were maybe 2 to 3 passes in this game where Milan probably could have done a little bit more with some of his creativity. He had a couple of swung balls deep onto the touchline that we really didn't do much with, but I thought he was as technical and as superb in that department as we've seen in recent weeks as well.
Yep.
So I think it's just kind of another indicator that this player needs to be further up the pitch. He needs to be in that more advanced area. Whereas in this game, he obviously was playing alongside Rafa, Pulisic, and with Santi up top. But in that double pivot was Musa and Bondo. So I'm not saying that Musa, Bondo were anything extraordinary, but I think if you're able to get some sort of solidity in that double pivot and some more of like a defensive anchor, I think that gives a wealth of amount of freedom for Tijani to be that sort of final third difference maker, make the passes. He obviously had the great finish for the goal, which was crucial as well. We've seen Milan players miss that opportunity time and time again. In fact,
just a little bit.
Musa was in a very similar situation in the first half, and obviously he didn't round the keeper, but basically at the same proximity in the box, more on the right side, could have obviously went far post. But the fact that Tijani was super composed, showing that attacking verve, that clinical finishing and edge to his game that we didn't see much of last year. I think he only had 3 or 4 goals in the league. Yeah, but generally speaking, in the box, he's been much more crucial. The goal against Real Madrid and so on and so forth. So I thought the goals from a technical standpoint and build-up standpoint were also, it was almost like, again, great, but it was like frustrating because in pockets of this second half, I know it's Como, but Milan played some pretty good football, and the combination play looked pretty good at moments too. And it kind of makes you like scratch your head where it's like, why does it take being down a goal? Why does it take the second half of a game and not the first half of the game to link these sequences of play and to create this sort of havoc? So we got the result, but I just wanted to kind of, touch on those things.
Yeah, I mean, just a real quick statistic, and this is actually real. So just real quick. No, it's not an Optapello. This is an Optatino, I guess. But put it this way: Morata. This is all Serie A statistics, by the way. Morata 5 goals, Santi Jimenez 2 goals, Tammy Abraham 2 goals. That equates to the number 9. 9 is the amount of goals that all the strikers for Milan this season have scored in Serie A. Tijani Reijnders himself 9 goals. Christian Pulisic
9 goals.
Christian Pulisic 9 goals. Pulisic, he's taken 3 penalties. TG, all of them are open play goals. Only one of our strikers in Tammy had scored a penalty. I believe that was against Venezia, where they were just handing out penalties like hotcakes that game. So again, that just shows the type of production that you're getting. It backs up and supporting everything that you're saying as well. The frustration again with the combinations that you're talking about within the midfield. Bondo unfortunately gets a yellow card within that first half, and that necessarily was not on him because Musa did a bad job of blowing his assignment. Bondo, I don't think, had to take that yellow card foul. The 4 defenders were at the back in defense, ready to go. He didn't really trust his teammates in that sense because he picks up the foul and tackles. I forget the player that he tackled at that point, just preventing him with the shirt grab. So it's a preventable yellow. Part of it is on him for not realizing and understanding his teammates behind him. And the other part was Musa really put him in that situation where he felt like he had to foul. Which is kind of frustrating. And to the point that I'm bringing up now is, when do we see a Fofana and Bondo combo? Because it just seems like
Napoli.
Musa's suspended. Yeah. And to me, I find it fascinating that Musa had kind of gotten the quick hook in the match where João Felix is subbed on within the first half. Musa once again struggles here. He's struggling within the final third. He's had his inconsistencies. We see the flashes. We know that. We like to see more of them. They're just not there enough. And now at this point where Fofana has been sitting on the bench, he has been sort of relegated into that role. When do we see Bondo, who has looked good and calm on the ball and not really pushing up as far as a Reijnders or Fofana or Musa has, where do we kind of see him filter in and sort of get that balance within the midfield, because then it gives more freedom to Reijnders in general. And, maybe Fofana pushes up a little bit more and Bondo covers a bit, because out of all the midfielders within this team right now, Fofana and Bondo are sort of two of those guys who don't push up as much, even though Fofana has a propensity to do so. I think there could be a little bit more balance with those three midfielders on the pitch, and we haven't really gotten a chance to see that just yet because of Bondo's injury, Fofana's sort of injuries, and then, Bondo gets subbed off because of a yellow card, and now, Fofana comes on and he's playing with those midfielders. So we haven't really seen a long run, of these midfielders together. So do you think that's something we obviously see against Napoli, which is the first game back again after the break?
I think it's going to require it, because I think the way that Napoli plays in the midfield area, they have numbers in that 3-5-2. Their wing backs are very involved. In Gisa, you have Lobotka, you have guys that are physical, guys that also can carry the ball forward and make it really difficult for those in the double pivot that are armoring the back four, but also the back four in general, right? It's breaking that initial bank of two that has been very easy for a lot of the teams that we've come up against. So I'm curious to see if, Sergio goes more offensive. Does he say, you know what, Musa out, I'm going to go for Fofana and Tej in the double pivot, and then maybe he puts Felix out there and kind of tests the waters and see how all these players can coexist? Me personally, I don't know if it's the time for that. I don't think the game is going to be open enough where you're going to require or ask a João Felix to get on the ball. He's going to do all these sorts of things, and he's going to break down a team that's obviously very well structured, really well organized under Conte. So I'm curious to see. He's got obviously a little bit of time. We have the international break, but that's a big test coming out of the break for sure, because I think obviously Napoli, they need these results without question.
They're going to be at home.
They're going to be at home. They just slipped up. They've been struggling a little bit. They haven't really been, cement. They had the tie against Inter, but they haven't really been a team that's been sort of ascending at this point of the season.
No, Napoli have one win in their last five.
Yeah, one win in the last five, and Inter seem to be picking up that steam at the right part of the season. So
yeah,
I guess we'll see how Sergio plays.
It's going to be interesting. I think the pressure's on Napoli. We saw. We'll obviously preview that when it gets closer to the match. But again, I'm not confident for Milan going in on the road with the way they've been playing. Napoli have a lot of time to prep for this, and that's in favor of Antonio Conte. They've been missing on Gisa recently, so
I almost kind of like this match though for Milan in a sense, because
I get where you're coming from.
If you think you're going to go to the Maradona and you're going to play this sort of same formulaic way of doing things that we've been seeing, and you think you're going to be a slow starting team, you're going to be able to go down one goal and all of a sudden reverse this. Under this team, this opposition, as you mentioned, that maybe not in good form, but a team that's really well drilled and well conditioned for this sort of match, I think that you're going to be in line to potentially get absolutely beat down. So I think that Milan need to be in a position mentally. I think that's obviously going to be the big focus on this, because I think on paper, Milan have a team that should stack up well against a Napoli. If you're going player by player. But yeah, I think that Milan need to get the fundamentals. They need to get the sort of quote unquote ABCs of football right. Positioning, just avoid the cataclysmic errors, and I think they'll find themselves in a decent position to get a point when that time comes. Obviously, we'll touch on it in our review or preview.
Yeah, and I think just getting a point in general would be
good. I don't know who else plays around Serie A that weekend. I think that's
I'll pull it up real quick for us.
Milan have been getting some favorable luck as well the past couple weeks. So maybe talk about that.
Juve and Roma have relatively easy matches. Same goes for Bologna as well. They play Venezia, Genoa for Juve, Lecce for Roma. Again, Fiorentina-Atalanta is really one of those more favorable matches, I guess you could say, out of the teams that are ahead of them and sort of competing for those spots. So you'll see a team drop points there again. But Napoli, Milan, Inter, Udinese, Inter is just not even on Milan's radar, and vice versa in terms of competing for anything. So again, it'll be interesting. We'll kind of get to that. But just to wrap up this, Tammy Abraham's appearance, I thought was a great cameo for him. He did everything in terms of link up play, the sort of stuff that he's better at as opposed to Santi. You just have to give out a shout out to him because it was just a good appearance. And, when you have a cameo like this, I think it deserves some praise because ultimately it did help Milan win the match. And he was just very calm and composed with it. So it was nice to see Tammy do well in that sense. He gets the game-winning assist with this. So I just wanted to give a shout out to him with that. So again, any quick thoughts on Tammy before we talk about the overall scope for top four and what lies ahead for Milan?
Yeah, he's had these types of performances, several times this year. And I think that this is the role for him. I don't think, he's going to completely be on the bench to start every game the rest of the season. Obviously, you're going to probably still play Santiago Jimenez for every game because that's the guy you just spent 30 million plus on. But I think that Tommy's kind of carved out this sort of role, which has been a good role for him. I don't think it's necessarily going to change his fortunes or his future as a Milan player. I think Milan are probably going to wind up sending him back unless, of course, they can work out some sort of deal, which I think, according to reports from Matteo Moretto, it doesn't seem likely. I think that there were certain things kind of factored in when Milan and Roma did the loan swap, do Tammy and Alexis. But I think now it's kind of simmered, and I don't anticipate Tammy being a Milan player beyond the season, especially with a potential new coach, especially with new management and the possibility of maybe bringing Alexis back. So, but I think for this game in general, I thought that Tammy, gave us exactly what we needed, right? He gave us a sort of reference point, someone to play back the goal, let the guys come in behind. And that's kind of what we saw for the goal against by Tijani, right? Came in behind, made that run, called for it, perfect finish. So a really good performance by him.
And again, it's not just an audition for Milan, it's an audition for other clubs who are potentially interested in his services. Could easily see him going back to the Premier League. No doubt about that. Within Serie A, his wages are kind of high at 6 million net or so. So there's no way, in my opinion, that Milan were to keep him. I think they're going to look within Serie A to actually add another striker, maybe evolve a role for Camarda, or unless Camarda goes on loan. I think it's just still too early to tell because of your exact point. We don't know what's going to happen with a director or again, with a new manager if that were to happen. And speaking of a potential new manager, I think a lot of it hinges on this top four being on life support. This is a very realistic thing, and I had mentioned it last episode. Not saying this is going to happen. I think it would still be a kind of surprise, in my opinion, if Milan get Europa League. We've seen inconsistencies and overall how it's been with these teams in Serie A this season where no one has really sort of distanced themselves this season, even to an extent. Atalanta beat Inter both times this season. They handled them both times. The 6-point gap between them, it's really just, in my opinion, an Inter-Napoli race with Atalanta in the rearview mirror. You look at it, Bologna, 53 points. 53 points sitting there with the last Champions League spot for what we know right now. With Bologna 4th, and then Milan all the way in 9th with 47. So they're 6 points off. Milan still have to face Bologna after the break as well. Those are one of the more tougher matches that they're going to be having. It's right
at home
there.
At least.
At home. And they just narrowly lost that one against Bologna. A very avoidable one. They could have beaten them. It's, to me, I'm not confident in it. I don't think it'll happen. But mathematically, realistically, they could do it. They could still do it. It's alive. It's literally, like I state here, it's on life support. Milan have an opportunity to do this and salvage the rest of their season here, where there is a world where Milan win Coppa Italia and get top four. Whether or not that happens, I don't think it will. I think Bologna and Roma are sort of these teams that we've seen that are in the picture for it, that have been the most consistent within 2025. As we know, Roma has done a very good job in 2025 of having the ability to rack up a bunch of points. Paulo Dybala will be out for a month for them, but they're not playing in Europa League anymore. They're only playing in one league and one competition. And on top of it, they have a very difficult schedule as well coming out of it, just like a lot of these other sides here. I will say the pressure is mounting ever so greatly with Juve, as opposed to any other team here. So how do they manage that? Lazio seem to be losing steam as well. A 5-0 beatdown from Bologna is very scary for them. They've been dropping points as well. Bologna, with the least amount of pressure, I'd say they're the smallest club out of everyone that is competing. They just seem to rack up results. Vincenzo Italiano has done a remarkable job. He really hasn't gotten enough credit this year. Slowly, you're seeing it more of. Again, Fiorentina, they beat Juve, but then they kind of slip up as well. All these teams here have flaws, including Milan, that can see them slip up over the course of 9 matches. 9 matches is a sure a hell of a lot of points on the board between a 6 point gap. A lot can happen. A lot can happen within that window. You never know if Milan go through one of these stupid stretches where they're beating teams that a lot of people don't think they should beat. How do they handle the Coppa Italia stuff? I just think it's very interesting how, despite all of this, and what makes it more frustrating, like we said last episode, that they're still in the picture. Somehow, it's insane. 6 points is not insurmountable. It's really difficult because of the stretch that's coming up with these fixtures here, and I'll pull it up real quick with what's coming up. But just what are your thoughts that like this is still somehow a possibility?
I think the stretch is going to say a lot about where this team's character is, and I think it's going to also test Sergio and ultimately whether or not he's able to get this team to focus in and lock in for this. What is it? Next 9 matches of football.
9 matches. Well, 11 matches in total. 9
right,
for Serie A.
For Serie A, right? So I think that's going to say a lot about where this team is at. I think that you mentioned it. It's on life support. 6 points doesn't seem insurmountable, and it seemed like top 4 a couple weeks ago was like the way we were playing, the tempo of our football, the tone, the environment did not seem easy, or it seemed very uneasy around Milan. But a couple results, however you slice it, regardless if they were sexy or not, they weren't. But Milan got 6 points from their last 2 games. They're in a position now where there is an opportunity. There is a window. I mean, Fiorentina, they absolutely dominated a Juventus team that has looked terrible, and they're also on life support. The way their coach is on the hot seat, a lot of these players underperforming. Fiorentina, Palladino has been heavily criticized too, and he was in sort of limbo, right? He's had a pretty bad 2025, right? So I think that if you look at where Milan's at, and you kind of have this sort of conversation within yourself as a Milan fan, and I revert back to, I don't know what movie, maybe it was the Avengers movie, where it's like, don't give me hope. Like, that's what it feels like. Because I think that if you get a result, a draw against Napoli, and a couple teams slip up and it's maybe 5 points, and you go to have the head-to-head game still against some of these teams, and Milan are rounding into form, and they're getting some momentum, and they're finally at March 18th, or, a couple weeks later, okay, it took them this long to click, but they're clicking at the right time when teams are limping to the finish line. Milan can find themselves in the last couple games of the season with something to play for in the top 4 conversation, which seemed improbable a couple weeks ago. So I think if I was speaking to the players, if I was, transmitting some sort of message to this fan base and to our community, it's tunnel vision. It's one next game up mentality. Every game is a final. You have to focus on your results only, because those around you, teams are going to win. Teams are going to slip up. Maybe Lazio figures it out. Maybe Bologna slips up. Maybe Juventus get into some rhythm. Control your 3 points and put the pressure on everybody else. Because right now, Milan are on the outside of top 4 looking in. Mm-hmm. If those teams completely botch it with a bad Milan this year, then I think it says a lot that there is a window. There is a pathway to the Champions League for Milan next year. But they got to control their own games in front of them. What's on their own plate.
Again, we see these fixtures here. Napoli away, Inter home, Coppa Italia doesn't really count. Fiorentina, Milan, Udinese, Milan. Udinese is away. I was at the reverse where Chukwueze scored that winner. That was my lone match ever at San Siro. And it's funny because a lot of these matches too, and the teams in which they played, they were very close, and Milan had opportunities to win them. Milan should have beat Fiorentina if they gave
Yep.
Pulisic the penalties. It's very likely
Even
he scores.
Atalanta, a late goal.
Yeah, I was just going to say Atalanta, near post. I mean, listen, CDK dunks on Teo. People say it's a foul. It's not. I don't think it was a foul. Just again, napping at the far post. Lookman just gets a tap in. They don't, not even looking at arguably one of the players of the season within Serie A. Just again, Napoli, Milan, that first fixture that they both had, Milan were missing their entire 11 basically. So kind of hard to gauge on what was going on there. Again, Udinese is always going to be difficult on the road. Again, with the Coppa Italia, Venezia, Milan should beat Venezia. There is no excuses with that. But again, you just gotta get results. It just doesn't matter at this point. We'll see. It's the team that you trust the least out of the top 9 because they're the ones that always mess up with these stupid individual errors. But it's again 9 straight matches. Just show up. A lot of guys can redeem their seasons. Teo Reijnders, you could redeem yourself. Teo Reijnders can completely reverse everything that he's done the past 2 years if he's great within the next 11 matches.
And helps
and by the way,
top 4.
And he didn't look that good against Como. I thought he went down way too easily on one of those. But I think Teo can turn it around. He has no excuses. He gets to play once a week. He's talented enough as a player that he should turn it around. Mike Magnan, same thing. Have to see the best version of him. Leao, we know this time of year, he turns it up. He's a better player, but he's going to have to win Milan one of these matches. Same can go for Pulisic, TG Reijnders. Let's see some more consistency from Santi. I think Santi's done pretty well in certain instances and pockets, but ultimately, Matt, I think the true story is going to be, can Bondo, Fofana, and Musa, and whoever else they decide to put in that midfield, can they be good enough against these sides that they could help Milan get back into that conversation? Again,
I think you look to the leaders. You look to the leaders at this point, the Kyle Walkers that have been around the block. They've seen what it feels like to be on winning teams to be maybe on the outside looking in at certain things. And that experience, I think, is going to be very huge. I think we have a lot of experience on this team, and perhaps also too in regarding Teo, Rafa, Magnan. These players have won at Milan, and I know this hasn't been the greatest season for this group, but you have to have that moment of reflection as an individual representative of this club and say everything else that's happened before this is out the window. We have 9 finals here. Let's do something here. We could do something special. Special in the sense of we can get back into top 4. It's not where we want it to be this season. Make no mistake about it. We still wanted to be playing Champions League football at this stage, but there are things to salvage this year. You still have the Copa. You already won a Super Cup. If I told this to any Milan fan on the beginning of the season, that on March 18th, you'll have a Super Cup, you'll be striking distance from top 4, and you'll be a couple matches from also a Coppa Italia, anyone would sign off on that, in my opinion. At the beginning of the season.
Where the season started, where they were in December, and we're not happy about it. We're not happy about anything with this, right? We're so many points off the top once again. It's just this is 3 straight years with a project that was supposed to be progressing ever further. And again, like I mentioned last week, and our good friend Ali also kind of sides with me and sees what I'm seeing is that not all hope is lost. It's a salvageable situation, but things need to break their way in a season in which things have not.
Yep.
And I think the most important thing in all of this is if you could get into top 4, like you're saying, if you could, again, in a scenario in which they don't lose to Inter in the 5 matches that they play them this season, they get to a Coppa Italia, they win Coppa Italia for the first time in over 20 years. They win a Supercoppa. They get back into the Champions League in what had seemed an insurmountable or impossible challenge, which again is still not a good thing because the standard dropped off dramatically.
Yeah.
Prior to the season, you say you get 2 trophies. You're back in the Champions League. You unfortunately don't win in Serie A. You got to the knockout stages. You lost embarrassingly against Feyenoord. A lot of fans would take the last time Milan did 2 trophies within a calendar year was 15 years ago, 14 years ago.
Yeah.
2011, 2012. They haven't done that. So to potentially pull that off, I think fans would be happy. They would be easier to digest it. But if they accelerate as well with a new director and an experienced director at that knows how to win within Italian football and can fix this mess of a situation that is the sporting side, then there is some hope.
Yeah.
There is some light at the end of the tunnel, but a lot needs to break Milan's way. So don't hold your breath, guys.
Yeah, they unfortunately haven't done themselves any favors to be in this point. But
Hey,
again, I
it's an
like I did
opportunity.
when Fonseca was fired and they brought in Sergio, and it's like you got to just look ahead. We can dwell on the mistakes of what happened with management, all the wrongdoings, all the wrong decisions they've made, and I'm not giving them an out because they still need to be held accountable for a lot of things they've done wrong so far. But I think if you're just a Milan fan and you're trying to sort of soak up any little bit of optimism that's out there for us, you look at it on March 18th and think, hey, we actually got a fighter's chance at getting top four when it didn't seem as though that would be the case. And we could potentially get 2 trophies this year. So, guys, keep a positive attitude. That's what we try to do. We try to be very honest. I still think, obviously, top four is going to be very difficult because you're asking Milan to essentially hit their stride now when they really haven't shown or proven they can, and they don't deserve that sort of trust and faith from us, in my opinion, if I'm being honest.
No, of
But we've
course,
seen with
100%.
this team, they're almost like the cardiac kids, right? They'll play and wow you against an Inter and a Derby, and you're like, where did this come from?
Real Madrid.
Real Madrid, and then they'll drop a stinker. You hope that the Napoli game is a really big test. I think in a way, the timing of it is good for Milan. And this is my final point. And the reason why I say that is because I think you've had you've had the time off, the extra time off for the international break. You've felt what it feels like to taste a little bit of victory, right? After being down in both of those games, go on the road and show us something. Go on the road against a really good team that's competing for the title that you want to and should be competing for at this stage of the project, and put forth a good performance that gives Milan fans that sort of trust and faith. This is okay. Like we showed up at the Maradona against a really good Napoli team and we got a draw. Like this is a possibility for us. But right now, we have to just kind of temper expectations and be in that sort of serene, calm moment because obviously
Absolutely.
this team can drive us nuts one week or the other. So
Yeah. Again, and this is just all purely speaking from a scope of positivity.
yeah.
We're not saying this is going to happen, but these scenarios are on the table. It's not completely ruled out. And as crazy as the sport is, as negative as the situation is at Milan currently, I think it's salvageable. And that's the beauty of this sport, is that nothing is done until it's done. And I'm excited for now to see how this plays out. Again,
You also
Milan,
see it too, Martino, from a lot of these players, like the comments from Tijani, the comments from a lot of these players. Matteo Gabbia, after some of those the defeats at Torino and Bologna, they're saying, they're like, we know it's tough. We're sorry to the fans, but like in moments like this, we need the fans. And that's where we need to, if you're going to jump ship now as a Milan fan and give up on the season, then
hell no.
you
Hell
can't. You
no.
can't do
You
that.
weren't here during the Banta era.
Right. Like this at this point of the season when there's still things to play for, this is where you got to say, okay, like the players, they're in, they're invested, they're all in.
That's exactly what I was saying last week, when there is no better time, and I know it sounds crazy, to be a fan than now. Because going through all the difficult moments and all the ups and downs, the turbulence of what is this management, this ownership, this club, the past 15 years.
Yeah.
Now is when you can try and salvage anything and just see the beauty within the sport. We just saw Newcastle win their first trophy within 70 years. We've seen crazier shit go down. Okay. All right. So, like, I'm just saying the door is open. There are possibilities. And like I've said for weeks now, these players, some of them have their Milan legacies on the line, and others have, a lot to prove in terms of, are they deserving of staying beyond this year? And I think ultimately it's a huge test. They're going to need their leaders. We'll see what ends up happening with that. But hey, you've seen the movie Major League.
Yeah.
2 in a row. If you get a third, then that's a streak. So if Milan managed to win another match, I think, again, not saying if they were able to pull off a win at the Maradona, I think that sort of momentum what I know we say this every couple of weeks with Milan. There's something. I truly think that. I am not going to lay down like a dead dog in this, because I've been through instances as a fan where I'm kind of more pessimistic than optimistic, and then the team surprises you and they end up winning, or they do
Yeah.
something that, like, if you also had your faith within the team, it feels more special. I don't want to give up on all these guys. I don't trust them, but I also won't give up on them, because there's plenty of talent within this side that they could pull off something. So yeah, again, guys, we
Good
appreciate all of
episode.
you. Be sure to subscribe and follow That Milan Podcast at That Milan Pod on Twitter. Thank you again for all the new followers from Kush's channel. We're very close to 6K subscribers. We hope to be there by the end of the month. We're around 50-ish or so. Also, be sure to follow us at That Milan Podcast there on Twitter. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok as well. You can follow Matt at Matt_Santangelo at AC Milan Bros. That's been on the ticker the entire time. Again, give us 5 stars on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your audio podcast. We appreciate all the feedback. We're growing there as well. At Martino_Puccio on Instagram, at Martino Puccio on every other social media if you're interested on some of the side stuff that I do. And again, do not forget to subscribe to our other channel, That Milan Podcast. I hope to do the live streams whenever we're capable of doing them afterwards on that channel. So in the future, if we're able to get you guys on there and have you guys chill out with us, that'd be great. Hopefully getting guests soon enough over the course of the next few weeks as well. Any other final comments or stuff, Santangelo, before we sign off?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for continuously supporting. Also, again, feedback and positivity regarding the video I did with Kush. So go check that out as well. It's got a massive community there, so it's great to see that sort of interweaving of the Milan community that he's built up, which, again, he provides a little bit of different content than we do. Production value, he does a great job there. We do something a little bit different here, and there's so many other creators within this Milan space that you do some fantastic work. So I just want to give credit to Kush and all the creators that, share the content that we put out, support us, like, subscribe, do all those sorts of things to help as a group, as a community of creators, give you guys everything that you guys are looking for as far as Milan content, insight, and perspective. So thank you guys.
Yes, again, Sempre Milan podcast, Mi Marco's channel, Old Heart Rossonero, who's growing rapidly. So very happy for a good friend. Again, MLM podcast with Max and Tino. They do a great job. They always support us. Shout out to you guys. We love you. Again, Kush and his channel, Milan Weekly Podcast, Milan Coast to Coast. Happy birthday to our good friend Fabio. He had a great Milan cake, by the way. Always, again, shout out to our great friends at Milan Club New York City as well, and all the Milan clubs all over the place. Chicago. I know Miami's buzzing big time. Our good friend David at Milan Club Philadelphia as well. And Milan Club Boston. We know a bunch of people over there as well. We just appreciate the community as a whole. We appreciate all you guys in the comments section that we see on a consistent basis, whether it's the lives, whether it's the podcast videos. So once again, thank you guys so much and take care.